I have a really good friend, very successful on the outside. When COVID occurred, he attempted suicide. And fortunately, he was not successful. And now his mission is to help other men like him. I think there's so many guys out there that look like they have their act together. And guys aren't like women. Women actually talk deep things like this. Guys talk about sports. We don't talk about, I'm struggling to make the rent, or I'm not spending enough time home with my kids, or, and my relationship is in shambles. These are real issues. But that's what I love about your podcast and your mission.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Derelict Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Tomeoni, and we have Danny Brassell here today. Danny, what's up, man? How are you?
Thanks so much for having me, Josh. I appreciate being a fellow derelict.
Good. You know, there's a whole thing right now where I'm trying to figure out if I'm actually moving past that demographic, which is interesting. I just recently retitled my book that's The Gospel of an Ex-Derelict. So maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more in the show.
Maybe I can move up to ex-derelict at some point.
Yeah. Danny, you're an awesome dude. You've done a lot of things. You've authored a lot of books. You've spoken in a lot of stages. You have had a very big audience, whether real or fake. Maybe we can talk about that story we just talked about right before we started recording. But, you know, it's really interesting because we reached out to each other about, I can't even remember who reached out to who, but we connected about being on the podcast a long time ago. And at the time I was like, yeah, I don't really see how it fits the vibe and the theme and everything else. And then we ended up having a couple phone calls, and I got to know you as a person. And I really I grew with admiration for you and what you've done and how much you really are just wanting to give back and to help and to serve people. You were very generous with me, with your time, with a free phone call to just go over some things that I was looking at doing. And I just, you know, you meet people every once in a while where you're like, yeah, they really care about what they're doing and they really care about helping people. That was my immediate impression of you. Thank you for being that person.
No, I'll make sure to play that clip for my wife to remind her of that.
Just play it on repeat. The next time you go on a road trip, just clip that one little clip and just repeat it in the car over and over.
Your husband cares. Seriously though, Josh, I really do. I appreciate all you do. And that, I mean, as a coach, the fulfilling part of coaching to me has been just being able to serve people wherever they're at and help them out. So thanks for that opportunity.
Yeah. For sure, of course. And maybe the next step to that is that the next time you're doing those incantations in the mirror where you're telling yourself that you love yourself, if you do those, then you could add this as well. And Josh also sees me as a respectable, right? So here's the deal. You are an author. You've helped a lot of other people author. You're really good at storytelling. You're great at speaking, bringing stories together. That's what we're all about here. Not only do I want to hear a bit about your story, but the idea that I had for the podcast today that we talked about already was just rewriting manhood in a society and a world where I think masculinity is often viewed as evil and toxic and chauvinistic and should be squelched from a very large percentage of the population, believing that anytime masculine presence shows up, it's bad, it's toxic, it's evil, it's dramatic, it's whatever word you want to use. And I don't believe that. I don't think you believe that either. And I'm interested, just as you, as an author, as a speaker, as somebody who's been through personal tragedy and triumph, what you see in that space today. So let's maybe start there. I think maybe the first thing that I want to start with is just, is there any aspect of your story that you want to share where you feel like your identity with or understanding of, let's say, your own masculinity changed?
That's a very deep question.
Right off the bat, we don't do surface questions here. I'm not going to ask you about the weather or nothing. We're just going to jump right in.
Well, Josh, you know a little bit about my story. I always say my autobiography should be entitled Pivots because I lived 9 different lives, but we'll catch up to the pivot that really addresses your question. So in 2000,
Cat pivots. That could be a good title for a book. Cat pivots.
Yeah, that's what I do. But in 2005, my wife and I attended a real estate seminar, which turned out to be a scam, and we lost everything. And the big thing about that, the big teaching point that addresses your question, was I have a little bit of that old school thought where I believe that the man has to be the provider. I'm the provider for my wife and the provider for my children, and that really did take away a lot of my masculinity when I was in a very vulnerable position and I didn't know if we were going to make it. Um, I'm I'm very blessed. God closes one door, opens another, because I was a professor at the time. And in order to avoid bankruptcy, I started speaking on the side, and my speaking business grew to become much more lucrative than anything in my education background. So I was really blessed for that. But it's kind of like I was on a stage a couple of weeks ago and the first two speakers talked about enjoying the journey. And I got up on stage. I'm like, you ever notice the people who say enjoy the journey have already succeeded? You know,
Yeah. Oh, 100%, brother. I love that.
when you're
100%.
going through the journey, you're like, man, I can't eat right now. I'm really enjoying this journey. This is great. I can't make rent, and my kids are going to get taken away from me. And I mean, nobody enjoys the journey. I just I hate that little bit of advice. I'm like, you know, yes, you need to be present. But I'll tell you what, in 2005, I was a wreck, and my math.
It's a cliche platitude that none of us actually believe, but we want to try to convince ourselves that we believe it to try to make it easier when we're going through the shit.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's tough. And I have a really good friend. When COVID occurred, he was very successful on the outside, but I mean, he attempted suicide. And fortunately, he was not successful, and now his mission is to help other men like him. But that's what I love about your podcast and your
That's
mission,
beautiful.
because I think
That's
there's
beautiful.
so many guys out there that look like they have their act together, and guys aren't like women. Women actually talk deep things like this. Guys talk about sports, we don't talk about what it feels like to, you know, I'm struggling to make the rent, or I'm not spending enough time home with my kids, or man, my relationship is in shambles. These are real issues. And so I applaud you for addressing those things. Guys need to hear that.
I appreciate that. Why do you think it is for, I agree with you, by the way. Why do you think it is difficult for us as guys to do that?
Well, I think it's prehistoric programming. I mean, we've been the hunters while the women have been the gatherers, and we're supposed to always put up this macho image. And I don't think there's anything wrong about being macho, but I also don't think there's anything wrong with being vulnerable too. I mean, even I was just watching a press conference with one of my favorite golfers, and he was talking about how, he's worked his entire life to reach the top of his profession. And even after a victory, the victory after 2 minutes is fairly hollow. And he's like, is this it? And I appreciated him being so honest. You just don't see that with most people, especially in an age of social media. Everybody puts their best foot forward all the time. And I use social media for business purposes, but I'm not going to show pictures of my family. I'm not going to show pictures of what I'm eating for dinner. I mean, I'll show pictures of what I'm reading just because a lot of people like to see what I'm reading. But I would be much more comfortable showing pictures of me when I just got out of bed and my hair's a mess and I haven't had any coffee, and we're things that are real. I think really more than anything, I think that's what people desire now, is a little bit of authenticity rather than always looking like you're at your best all the time.
I completely agree. I think those are the people online actually that tend to do really well, besides the whole surfacey bullshit that will always be there.
Yeah.
A couple of things that you said triggered my mind. The first one was you were talking about, an athlete that gets to the top of their game and then they just wonder, like, 2 minutes later, they just won the championship. They're like, then they feel hollow or empty or just like nothing happened. I saw a speech from Roger Federer, the really good, amazing tennis player, one of the best tennis players ever, the other day. And I think he was speaking at a graduation.
Dark.
And I'm going to,
The dark commencement was 2 years ago. Yeah, it's fantastic.
okay, have you seen it?
I have.
Yeah, so I'm essentially I'm gonna butcher what he said, but he essentially was talking about how every point was just a point. And he was talking about how when you walk up to have the opportunity to get that point, you want to give it everything that you have, but then when it's done, it's done. To not look back on it at all, whether it's a good or a bad point, because every single point is just a point. And then he goes on to tell this story about how he's won, I think it was like 80% of his matches. Did you hear that part?
It's my favorite part. You're hitting
It's my favorite part. So he won like 80% of his matches.
but only about 54% of the points or 52% of the.
It was like almost half and half as far as how many points he actually got. So if you would look at it as a grading scale, like in school, he got an F when it came to points.
Yeah.
And he is one of the best tennis players of all time. There's been several clips over the years that I love watching about Michael Jordan talking about how many times he's messed up. And there's this one specific interview where he says, yeah, everybody looks at the championships and the times that I win the game, but here's how many times I lost the winning shot of the game. Here's how many times I've lost the championship. Here's how many times I didn't carry my team over the edge. And he counts through all those. And they're dramatically more than the times he won for arguably the best basketball player of all time. So those are always such good reminders to me whenever I start getting down on myself about failure or setbacks, etc., because the best of the best have more failures than success.
Well, and I think the lesson there, Josh, that's why everybody should love the movie Rocky. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. First of all, the story of Sylvester Stallone making that movie is absolutely one of the most inspiring things I've ever heard. But the best part of the movie to me is the night before he fights Apollo Creed, Rocky's in bed with Adrian. He's like, Adrian, I'm going to lose tomorrow, but I don't care. All I want to do is go the distance with the champ. And if you watch Rocky, a lot of people forget he actually loses to Apollo Creed at the end, but he went the distance. And the reason we love Rocky is he gets pounded in the face, but he gets back up every single time. And the examples you were given of like Michael Jordan, he's putting himself out there. He's willing to take the last shot. He's willing to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I love people like that. That's why I love working with entrepreneurs. These are people that they're tired of working for somebody else. So they're going to bust their butt working for themselves, but they're trying lots of different things. And yeah, same thing with your podcast. How many of your friends have told you, yeah, I'd like to do a podcast, Josh, but they never do anything. Most people are just talkers. And so I only want to surround myself with people like you, people who are actually in the world doing some things. They're all right with being a little bit uncomfortable. That's how we progress. I mean, the easy way
and
be like everybody else.
I absolutely agree with you. And there's a Buddhist saying, chop wood, carry water. And the idea behind the saying is like, your emotions don't matter. Like the way that you're feeling about things don't matter. And let me come back to that. This stuff doesn't matter. You just need to do what you need to do. Now, they're also not saying that they don't matter, right? That's not actually what they're saying. They're not saying ignore all of your emotions. That's not a Buddhist philosophy. But the point is like, if your mission is to chop wood, carry water, then keep chop wood and carrying water until something else pops up, because something will pop up. Like, Michael Jordan, of course, is one of my all-time athletic heroes.
Me too.
For so many different reasons. But a lot of people know the story of him getting cut in high school from the high school basketball team, but not everybody knows the full story there. And I remember hearing it years after I'd already known that, and I heard the full story. And the full story was he gets cut by the high school coach, because the high school coach essentially comes to him and says, you have more talent than anyone else here, but you're not putting in the effort. You're not willing to actually go the distance. And those are the only people I want on my team. He says, so you're cut, you're done. And then he offered him something, which most people don't know about this story. Maybe you do, maybe you don't.
I don't know this story.
He said, if you want, here's what I'm willing to do. I will commit to show up every morning at 6:30 before school and practice with you from now until next year, so that and if you do that, you will be on the team next year and you will carry us to great heights. A lot of people don't know that part of the story. It wasn't just Michael Jordan being like, oh, I got cut from the team. Now I just got to put in more effort. Like, of course he did that, but he also had an amazing mentor and somebody who was there willing to coach him through that showed up every day before school to help him practice. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a great, his mom, Dolores Jordan, wrote a book called Salt in His Shoes, and it's about him as a boy. And, he takes the last shot and he loses the game for his team. He runs home crying. He's like, Mama, how do I get better? And she's like, well, you want to get better than everybody else, Michael, you got to do two things. First of all, you got to practice harder than everybody else. Second of all, you got to put salt in your shoes so you'll grow, boy. And so every day he practices harder than everybody else, and every night he puts salt in his shoes so he'll grow, and then a year later, there's the moment of truth. 3, 2, 1, he shoots. Read the book, find out what happens. But to me, my favorite Michael Jordan story is when he first retired from basketball and decided he had no problem failing on the public stage as a minor league baseball player for the Birmingham Barons. Same story is the batting coach said he was the first one in the cage in the morning. We did extra bat, and in the evening he did extra batting cage. And then a lot of people forget that the minor league manager for the Birmingham Barons was a guy by the name of Terry Francona, who eventually will be in the Hall of Fame as a Hall of Fame manager from the Boston Red Sox. Now he's manager of the Cincinnati Reds. But even Terry Francona, he said, if Michael had another 1,500 at bats, that guy, he's an all-star. His work ethic was second to none. And people forget about, I'm sorry, I keep on giving golf analogies. Gary Player is one of my favorite golfers of all time. He has a perfect swing. And people always say, oh, I wish I had your swing. I wish I had your swing. And one day he just was fed up. He's like, no, you don't. You don't want to have to get up every morning, hit 1,000 balls until your palms are bleeding, then bandage your palms and then hit another 1,000 balls. No, no, no. You wish you had my swing without doing anything for it. People don't look at the effort that these people put into, and we're using sports as an example, but it's in anything that you do. I work with people that are terrified of speaking and helping them speak. And the way you get better at speaking is you got to do the reps. You got to practice. It's just like anything else. And eventually, my youngest daughter right now, she's learning how to drive. And it's so cute right now, Josh, because she gets in the car and she's adjusting mirrors and she has her hands on the 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock position. I promise you, a year from now, she'll be flicking the radio. She'll be putting on lipstick, eating a Big Mac, driving with one hand, because the reason she'll feel confident is she put in the effort. She had to put in the reps. It's the same thing with anything in life. You got to put in the reps and you're going to fail at first. And, was it Samuel Beckett? He said, ever tried, ever failed, no worries. Try again, fail better. Yeah, fail better. Let's fail forward.
One last example that I heard a few years ago, and that was Steph Curry has been known to say that he practices 500 three-pointers a day.
Jeez.
And he's been doing that every single day since he was like 15 or something like that. Every single day, without fail. Like, doesn't matter if he's sick, doesn't matter if he's on vacation, doesn't matter. 500 every single day. Now, you look at the results, and he is by far the best three-point shooter of all time, like by a landslide. If you look at how many threes he's made versus even number 2, who's like half of the number of threes or something. Ridiculous. So, he's probably made something more than 2 million practice shots in his lifetime, if you do the math there. And he's made, I think, over 4,000 now in games. So do the math. 4,000 of 2 million. Talk about a failure rate.
Yeah.
Right? He's made 4,000 shots out of 2 million. That's insane. And that gets him to be the absolute best. Right. And you could use this. Yeah. So that's so good. I want to go back to something that you said earlier, because we could go on sports analogies all day. And I want this to become a sports thing. But also, thank you for the reminder for Rocky. I realized that's a really good classic movie I have not watched with my kids yet. And I want to show them that movie. I think they would love it. So you were talking earlier about when your life was in disruption and changing, and about how it sounded like, you didn't say these exact words, but you basically said that your purpose was as a provider, or at least that was one of your purposes on this planet. So that when you weren't a provider anymore, it sounds like you lost purpose, lost mission, right? Talk about that a little bit. What does that look like? Because I think that a lot of guys struggle with that. So as you know, I work with a lot of guys. My entire focus is men that are divorced. So whether they're first going through the divorce or they're divorced 10 years ago, doesn't matter. But my entire focus of men that I work with are divorced men. And every single divorced man faces this at some point. And usually it's with the divorce. Usually it's, well, I had this life. Now I have a completely different life. And I have to figure out, what is my purpose? What is my mission? And it's not necessarily because of providing. It could be. But I'm just curious, like, what did that do to you? And how did you come out of it?
Yeah, it tore me to pieces, Josh. Definitely. You know, one of the good things that happened was at my lowest point, I became Christian, which I'm always embarrassed to admit. But the more I read the Bible, I'm not the first screw up to find Jesus.
Why are you embarrassed to admit that?
What's oh well, I I'm around a lot of people that they get to be high and mighty and show me, you know, how good they are as Christians. I'm like, I'm pretty much a screw up, and I don't really worry about it just because Jesus, most of the examples he gives in the Bible are of screw ups. It's actually Jesus is a great. I, I always tell people I want my Christianity to be a verb, not a noun. I don't want it to be something I tell people. I want people to see it in me, and that's what I'm no biblical scholar, but the more I read the Bible, Jesus, he's never in the church. Actually, he's always out helping people and teaching them that way. He's a great role model. Uh,
If I recall correctly, he was only in the temple twice.
yeah, and one time he was ticked off, thrown over.
One time he was 12 preaching to people
Yeah,
that
the
were
other time
much
was when
older
he was
than
a
him,
kid,
and the other time he was
amazing them all. Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
the other time he was basically disrupting a farmer's market, right?
Yeah,
So like,
it was a tough time for me at my lowest, and I kind of think that God laughs at me that I kind of made the point in my men's Bible study. I'm like, I kind of have to relish those low points in my life because I feel horrible, but I spend so much more time paying attention to Jesus when I need something. I feel like, oh gosh, please help, please help. There's a great movie with Burt Reynolds from the 70s called The End. He's trying to commit suicide, and at the end, he swam out into the ocean and he sees the light. He's like, "Oh my gosh, God, I have so much to live for." And then he looks. He's like, "Oh, the shore is so far away. Please, God, get me to the shore. I will give you 100% of everything I earn." And he's getting closer. He's like, "Please, I will give you 90% of everything I earn." By the time he makes it to the shore, we know how it ends. And I'm like, I'm exactly the same way. I feel like I'm paying a lot of attention to God when I need him and not so much when I don't. And hopefully I can get a little bit better about that. So that's really, there was a gentleman who, in the real estate scam, he was pretty high up in real estate. And so he basically met with the guy who had scammed me of all this money, and nothing came of it. But my wife noticed a huge difference after that meeting because I didn't know this guy very well. And I looked at her, I said, he doesn't even know me. And he just spent 2 hours trying to help me resolve this. I want to be like that. And that was, to me, that's a better Christian example than somebody saying, well, you're going to hell without Jesus. Well, I mean, I guess that works for some people. It wouldn't have worked for me. And so,
it's an interesting dichotomy of your purpose at that time too, right? Where we go back
yeah,
to purpose, and I'm feeling like my purpose, or you're feeling like your purpose is provider and doing all these things. And then all of a sudden you see this man walk in a beautiful, authentic, genuine way, just trying to help with nothing expected in return. And you're like, oh, maybe that's my purpose.
yeah. Well, that's a great point, Josh. I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, it was interesting. I was once at a retreat, a men's Bible retreat, and one of the rules was no guy could say what he did for a living. And that was kind of,
Good rule for a place like that,
it
for
was
sure.
interesting because as guys, like oh, so what do you do? How much do you
That's
make?
all we do.
Our identity.
And honestly, too, we do it awkwardly. Like, I will be spending time with people, and then just like out of the blue, it's like, so what do you do? I'm like, what? I'm like, sometimes I feel like people are attacking me with it. I'm like, chill out. Like I for years at networking events, when I got to a point where probably I'd been going to networking events for a decade, and I was just like so fed up with every single one of them. You know how that goes, maybe. And I was so tired of it that I literally would not answer the question, even at the events. Like, people would always be like, oh, so what do you do? I was like, I just go to networking events and drink. What do you do? I would just put it back on them. Because here's the thing. At the end of the day, no one really gives a fuck. Like, no one really cares what I do. At the end of the day, and maybe you disagree with me on this, but at the end of the day, we're all selfish people, and we all care about ourselves, number one. As much as we try to admit that we don't, and as much as we try to serve, and as much as we try not to be narcissistic, egotistical assholes, there is a part of us that still does that. Now, I don't believe it's the true part of us. I believe the authentic part of us is really amazing and beautiful and loving and kind and wonderful. And I believe everybody is that at their core. However, we all have that asshole part of us that just doesn't give a fuck because it's self-survival and we're just trying to figure all this stuff out. So what I found a long time ago in those scenarios is if I make it about them, then it doesn't matter. Because they just want to talk about themselves anyway. We all just want to talk about ourselves, right?
That's right.
So if I can open up a conversation, then I can get past that bullshit that I don't want to share anyway. Yeah, especially for me in my career. I mean, the longest piece of my career has been a financial planner. How do you think that goes over in events? Like it's like saying used car salesman.
Yeah.
Like no one wants to talk to you. Like, oh my God, not finance. Like people's heads explode, right? So I don't like, that's not how I want to start a conversation with somebody. So I'm not going to start it that way. So
yeah,
anyway.
I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, Josh, when you're 18, you care what everybody thinks about you. When you're 40, you don't care what everybody thinks about you. And when you're 60, you realize nobody was thinking about you.
So are you closer to 60 or to 40?
I'm definitely closer to 60, my friend, unfortunately.
So is that true for you?
At this point, yeah, chop off my head and count the rings. And it is the truth as you start to think more about, well, what's my meaning? I mean, when I go on stage, before I go on stage, it's always my prayer to God. I say, use me. And this is going to sound pathetic. I watch the movie Chariots of Fire like once a month. It's a movie about a couple of British runners in the night.
I know the movie. I used to be able to play the soundtrack on my piano.
It's about Harold Abrams and Eric Liddell, a Jewish and a Christian runner for the Britain in the 1920 Olympics. And the reason I always watch that movie is there's this scene where Eric Liddell, he's this devout Christian, and his sister's been pressuring him to go do his missionary work back in China. And so they're in Edinburgh, and he's looking over the city, and he says, gosh, it's beautiful here. I'm really going to miss it. I've made my decision, Jenny. I'm going to go back to China and do to the missions. And she's so excited. He's like, but first I'm going to run in the Olympic Games. And she gets disappointed. He's like, Jenny, what you don't understand is that I believe God made me for a purpose, and that's for the mission work in China. But he also made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure. I get goosebumps every time I hear that line, Josh, because that's what happens for me when I'm on stage or when I'm coaching a person. Sometimes I say something brilliant that there's no way I thought of that. That just came out. That was God using me as a vessel. And I get so excited about that. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, there's nothing better than helping somebody, because then I'm like, oh, I can get hit by a bus now. I know I'm going to the good place. I've had some significance I mean, how many people actually can point out that they're having significance? This is what all of us want. I mean, Michael Jordan, he might think he just played a silly game, but I guarantee you and I growing up, there are moments, I'll tell you, just during COVID, when they played The Last Dance, it was the greatest miniseries during COVID. I looked forward to it every Sunday night. And it just reminded me, I'm like, oh my gosh, everybody always shows him dunking. I forgot how he could just hang in the air for 7 seconds doing a layup, or how he just, every single game he came to play. I mean, he didn't have games where he scored 6 points and had 3 rebounds. Every game he was an all-star. And one of the books I wrote was, there was a great scene between when he was going to retire for the first time. Jerry Reinsdorf said, you can retire, but you got to talk to your coach, Phil Jackson, first. And so he talks to Phil Jackson. Phil says, I can't talk you out of retirement. I know I can't. But here's what I want you to understand, Michael, is that you play basketball the way Michelangelo painted and the way Beethoven composed. And when you retire, you're going to be denying millions of people the joy of watching you. Well, he's still retired, but the reason he came back, I think like 18 months later, was those words always hung in his head that Phil Jackson told him is, this is your gift. And I mean, he was blessed. He was blessed to know his gift. There's a great quote from Tom Cruise that I love. Is Tom Cruise, I think he said that ever since 4th grade, he realized the only thing he was good at was acting. And I thought, wow, that's actually a powerful quote. he knew his purpose early on. I mean, you and I are entrepreneurs. We got all these different pots on the stove. We were like, oh, is this what I'm supposed to, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. And that's where a lot of us are in life. And so I always admire people that they not only find their purpose, but then they just solidify it and they shine and they just make that their entire focus. It's something that I know I'm rambling at this point, but you got me thinking deep.
No, you're not rambling. I agree with you. I mean, there have been many times in my life where I've envied that person because I feel like I'm the ADHD squirrel entrepreneur over here trying to figure out what I'm doing with my life so many times. And that has not been my path. My path has been one heartache, one failure after another to try to figure out, who am I supposed to be speaking to? What's my mission? What's my purpose? And I guess let's talk about that for a moment, because I'm sure there's people listening and watching this right now that feel that way, that are like, yeah, I don't have the actor since fourth grade thing or the doctor since fourth grade thing or whatever, right? My daughter's in fourth grade right now and she knows exactly what she wants to do. So we'll see how that works out for her. She might be one of those people. She might be. She's an excellent dancer and that's what she wants to do. And I think that she very well could do that. So maybe that'll work for her, but that was not my story. So what would you say to a guy? Let's say that there is another guy here right now. What would you say to that guy about the process you went through to try to figure out, well, what is my mission? What is my purpose when it's not so clear?
Yeah, so this is why I read. I read all the time. I like to read biographies in particular about people. The thing you start to notice when you read biographies of successful people is none of them started out successful. They fell on their face a lot of times.
Absolutely.
Probably one of the people, so I'm going to move away from sports now. One of the people I think everybody in your audience should read more about is Abraham Lincoln. I mean, that guy experienced every type of failure possible. I mean, and Tony Robbins talks about it in one of his books, and a lot of people have written it in their books. Like they don't reveal his name until the end, but they're like, oh, let me tell you about a guy who failed at business at age 23, lost his first wife at age 25, failed at business at age 27, lost a congressional race at age 29. His love left him at age 33, failed at another congressional race at age 35, failed for a Senate race. I mean, and failed running for vice president, and then at age 48 becomes 16th president of the United States. It's Abraham Lincoln.
Not only one of the most successful popular presidents of all time, but then also had a very short run and died because somebody killed him. Like the ultimate failure, right? Like now he's dead, which is amazing.
Like, dang, you.
But here's the thing though. Like most of us, except for you and other people that have read his biographies, which I'm definitely going to. It's very fascinating to me. But most of us just know this much of his life.
Yeah.
Like we just know the presidency with a few speeches that were really popular and the fact that he helped emancipate the slaves and, like this much of his life versus like 30, 40 plus years of essentially failure. Fascinating.
He still has one of my favorite quotes of any politician. He said, I know the best way to defeat my enemies. I shall make them my friends. The book I would recommend to anybody, the great historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, who I love everything she's ever written. And she has a great TED Talk also, by the way, if you want to see a great TED Talk, because it's about, I don't remember if it was Lincoln she talks about or Roosevelt, Johnson, and baseball and her father. It's like it's such a great speech. She's a great speaker.
What's her name again?
The book is Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin. And so Team of Rivals, when Lincoln became president, he took all of his political rivals and made them his cabinet. This is a true story. It would be the equivalent of Donald Trump naming Joe Biden his Secretary of State. This is basically what Lincoln did. And all these guys hated Lincoln's guts. And by the time he was assassinated, they were all inconsolable. They're like, we've lost the greatest leader we've ever had. And the thing that I love about Lincoln, which is what I try to model myself on, even when he was a country lawyer, he was a great storyteller. And they say people would come from 20 miles away to the inn or the pub or whatever, and he'd be sitting there telling stories by the fire, and everybody just loved his stories. And during the darkest moments of the Civil War, when he was in cabinet meetings, he'd always lighten the mood with a story. There's actually a scene in the movie Lincoln where Secretary of War Stanton, there's Lincoln's about to tell his story. He's like, no, don't tell any more stories. But Lincoln tries to lighten the mood. So he sits there and he says this, he tells the story of, one of the founding fathers was Ethan Allen. And when he became an ambassador to England, some British soldiers decided they were going to have fun with Ethan Allen. And so they hung a portrait of George Washington in the latrine. And so they're playing cards with Ethan Allen that night, waiting for him to have to do his business. And eventually he does. And when he comes back from the outhouse, they're all snickering. And they say, did you see the portrait of George Washington in the outhouse? And Ethan Allen says, why, yes. And the British soldiers are taken aback. They say, weren't you insulted? He said, why, no. Every American knows that the sight of George Washington will scare the crap out of every British man.
That's so good.
How do you not love a guy like that? And he told stories like that all the time. He was a great storyteller and he was very wise. I mean, I read a story, it wasn't in that book, but it was a story where you used to be able to write editorials in the newspaper under pen names. And so he was ripping on this guy who was running for like county commissioner. And the guy found out it was him and he challenged him to a duel. So there's two important moments of this story. So when you're challenged to a duel, the person who's challenged gets to decide what kind of duel you're going to have. Is it going to be swords or guns or whatever? And I can't remember what the weapon was, but it was this weapon that Lincoln chose because the guy was much shorter than him. So you needed like a really long wingspan. And so Lincoln had a long wingspan. And so he chose that weapon and basically let the guy, he said, oh, you can't do it like this. So we'll call it a draw. And later on, when he was president, he had made this guy like, transportation commissioner or something. He gave him a pretty nice job. But the two lessons he learned is I shouldn't make fun of other people. And, I should always consider other people's points of view. Those are both really, it's a lesson that I wish more Americans would learn today is that, hey, we're going to disagree. We don't have to be disagreeable. And as a matter of fact, I like being around people that disagree with me. You don't have to agree with everything I have to say. I don't have to agree with everything you have to say, but I do have to be respectful of you. And I should take the time to consider your point of view. I'm pretty good about this even with my wife, is I'll disagree with her vehemently. And I'm pretty good about 3 days later saying, I've been thinking about what you're saying. And I think you might be right. And usually she is right. That's why our relationship tends to work well is we have before the kids, I was always right and she always got her way. And now that we have the kids, she's always right and she always gets her way. So it should work for her.
I definitely get what you're saying, and I agree with most of it. I don't know if I agree with one statement you said though, and that was we have to be respectful of other people, and maybe it's different terminology of how we're using the word. So maybe being respectful for someone, for you, does that mean being cordial, or like what do you mean by respectful?
Yeah, so I mean, Charles Swindoll, he said that he's convinced that 10% of life is what happens to him and 90% of how he responds. And so it is with us, our attitudes. The one thing I can always control is how I'm going to be to other people. I can't control how they're going to be to me. Cordial.
I understand what you're saying. So that's more about how you're responding. It's not about how you feel about the person. Okay,
Exactly.
good. So I think that that's actually a good point to bring up as well, because I've talked about this quite a bit on this podcast because it's something I'm pretty passionate about. And that is the fact that I do not believe that everyone deserves your respect. I believe that, so for shared humanity, I believe that we should all attempt to love each other and care for each other and be concerned for one another. So I believe just as a human being, even if I vehemently disagree with you on every single topic under the sun, I still believe that I should do my best to love you and just love you as a human, just as a fellow human. But that doesn't mean that I have to be respectful, or it doesn't mean that I have to respect you. And the reason why is because I think it's extremely dangerous if you say that you need to respect everyone, because some people are not respectful. So if you're not respectful, you shouldn't respect them. I say this to my kids all the time. I say, I will love you no matter what. You literally could do anything on the planet that's not going to remove my love. I mean, they could do the most horrific stuff ever. I just think of like watching Dahmer and like all the stuff his dad went through. with his, insane son. And I tried to picture myself while I was watching that show, like, would I be able to still like love my son if he was Dahmer, right? And I think the answer is yes. Who knows, unless it actually happens, and hopefully that never happens. But I think the answer is yes. However, I would not respect him whatsoever because he's not doing things that are respectful. And I think
Okay,
it's really dangerous when people say that they need to respect people because of the fact that that then means you need to respect people through everything, which I disagree with, which then
yeah,
means I could be in an abusive relationship and somebody's like, well, you have to respect the person. No, I don't. Not if they're abusing me. There's absolutely no way I'm going to respect them. I'm going to love them as a human, but I'm going to do the opposite of respect them.
yeah,
Not
I'll
at all.
agree with you on that, Josh. I guess the example I'll give is when John Hinckley tried to assassinate President Reagan. One of the people he hit was President Reagan's press secretary, James Brady, and he was interviewed like a year later, and they asked James Brady if he was willing to forgive John Hinckley, and his response was wonderful. He said, "I'm willing to forgive him. I don't want him to win the Irish sweepstakes, but I'm willing to forgive." And so I like that answer. Is there's some people where, I don't really, I mean, and you're right, there's plenty of people I don't want to shake their hand. I was watching a major soccer tournament recently, and leader of a country was shaking the hands of everybody that won. And I'm like, I don't know if I would want to shake that person's hand. This person's a pretty much a jerk. I mean, so I get what you're saying. I mean, I don't have
Well,
to say,
I think the difference, though, with what you were saying earlier is, are we talking about our reactions? Because your point is very, very well made. And that is that I can only control
yeah,
how I respond to people and
that's
what
right.
I do with people. The thing of respect is like, if you're a respectful person, I'll respect you. If you're not a respectful person, I'm not going to respect you. However, what's more important, probably even than that, is, well, who am I and how am I showing up?
Yeah,
And
that's
am
right.
I bringing my authentic self? And more importantly, am I being a respectful person in this situation? And I can be a respectful person in a relationship or in a situation with somebody else who's not respectful that I don't respect. And that's all I have control over anyway.
That's right.
If they're going to continue to act disrespectful, that's fine. Go ahead. I don't care. You're a human. You're an adult. You do what you want. But I can still show up respectful in that situation.
Yeah, and I also think there's an importance between reacting versus responding, because a reaction is giving them the power, response is giving you the power.
For sure. So let's go back. If you have anything else to share, I would love to hear anything else that you have as far as just finding purpose, finding mission, like anything that you found in your life that was like these aha moments.
I think we have to live a little bit slower, Josh. I feel like we're living in a really fast-paced world, and that's why I love traveling and I love reading, because both force me to kind of just
Slow down.
pause and
Yeah.
reflect. And I think a lot of people that are suffering right now, and I know there's people in your audience that are suffering, and they're hard on themselves. And I'm like, this too shall pass. One of my favorite speakers, Les Brown, he was going to attempt suicide, and he has a line that I love, and it serves a lot of people. He says suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And there's so much wisdom in that statement, as all of us have those lowest of lows. And I don't mean to disregard anybody in your audience that's really experiencing some pain right now, because I've been in some very painful situations. But that's why I think it's necessary to read positive things and to take those nice long thought walks. And I'll share a story with you. I'm very happily married. I love my wife. She's the greatest person on the planet, my best friend. Years ago, though, I was dating a woman that I had proposed to her, and she rejected me. And so I went to South America for 2 months to get her off my mind. Uh, I
Like we
was
all do.
Yes, I was I was in Brazil, and I got mugged 4 times in 2 weeks in Brazil. I was like, "Man, it was
Wow.
ridiculous." And one time they stole my backpack, which I didn't care. There was cash in it, but what I really cared about was my journal was in there. And I had written already 180 days worth of entries.
Ooh, that
I just
sucks.
I'm so miserable right now. So then I was on the Amazon River from Balaam to Manaus on a slow boat for 6 days. And guess what? And if you ever want to lose 30 pounds in 1 week, that's the way to do it, is to catch malaria. And I was just so miserable. I'm like, this is pointless. Everything is pointless. And one morning I'm sitting on the deck of the ship, the slow moving boat, and I'm watching the captain of the ship empty the trash cans directly into the Amazon River. I'm like, man, they have no environmental control here. And all of a sudden, I see the sun rising over the Amazon, and it was like God talking to me directly, where I'm like, I felt like losing my journal was like losing my girlfriend. At first, I was in total shock. And then I was really, really sad. And then I was really, really angry. And then I was indifferent. I realized, you know what? What are you bitching about, Danny? You're on the Amazon River. You got a great family. You got really good friends. Let's put things in perspective. I guess the advice I give people when they're feeling really down, I'm like, go volunteer at the Children's Cancer Ward in the hospital. You're going to see some people really struggling. I know you're a father too. I mean, your kids become everything. That becomes a purpose for you is, what kind of role model am I to my children? Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so
Yeah.
true. I remember a mentor told me this a long time ago, and they said every circumstance and every emotion is temporary. Every single one. No matter where you find yourself, whatever the circumstances, whatever the situation is, whatever emotion you're feeling, as you said earlier, this too shall pass. It will eventually end. It will not stay forever. So that's what I try to consistently remind myself when I get into the dumps, if you will,
Yeah.
whether that's depression or anxiety or anger or some other uncomfortable emotion for me, is I just remind myself that I need to feel this and I need to be present in it because it's not going to be here forever. And then I can switch. I can get out of this, and I will get out of this because every other time in my life I've gotten in this, I've gotten out of it. So I agree with you. It's really sad when people just decide to end it like they feel like they can't get out of it, because you can, because it always will happen. It always happens every single time. And that same mentor actually told me something very similar to what you said. And that is, if you're ever feeling down or in your own head, go find somebody to serve. And I have found that in my life, it doesn't even have to be this huge gargantuan thing. Like, I know we always think like, oh, I got to fly to Africa and feed people that are dying on the street or something of malaria or whatever, right? That's not even the case. Like, I've found myself, if I'm in a funky mood, if I just leave my house and then go walk into a coffee shop and open the door for someone, or smile at the barista and just be friendly to them, not to flirt with them or any hidden motives, but just to be there. Like, it's those little things that actually like help me a lot. Like, I open the door, I'm like, see, I did something today. Like, it seems so stupid, but sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes you just need a little something where you're just adding a little bit of something to somebody's day. Like, as an example, I don't want to toot my own horn, but this just happened today. So I'll just use it as an example where a really good friend of mine that I didn't know 6 months ago. I think we met about 6 months ago, 7 months ago now. The way that we met is she is a barista at the coffee shop that I call my office, because that's pretty much where I am, second to my house when I'm doing my work. And we've developed a really good friendship since then. Her and her husband have come over several times and introduced me to other friends, yada, 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 yada. Anyway, she's leaving the coffee shop for bigger and better things. She does other work as well, but she just decided it was time for her to change. So I just went this morning. I didn't have a lot of time because my schedule is back to back this morning, but I decided that I was just going to go take her card and just say, good luck. On to the next one, right? And just that very act, I mean, it obviously meant a lot to her, but it honestly didn't even really matter if it meant anything to her at all. Like, it really didn't to me. Of course, that's why I did it. But there's an added benefit as well, that just me doing it, irregardless of how the person responds, because this can happen as well sometimes too, right? Is that we can try to be nice to somebody, they don't respond well. Well, if I can just have the act of serving be the thing that brings me joy, then it doesn't matter how they respond. So the very fact that she had an amazing response was just icing on the cake for me, but I would have been fine otherwise. I would have been fine just delivering the card to her, feeling like, okay, I did a good deed. today. And it's not that big of a deal. It didn't take me very much time. And it was impactful for me, whether it was impactful for her or not. And I think that is, maybe I feel this way because I'm a recovering codependent, but I always got to be cautious that I'm not serving other people just so I feel good about myself. What I'd rather do is feel good about the process of serving, feel good about that, not so they can make me feel better, because that's codependency. I don't want her to make me feel better. I'm not doing that to get validation from her. I'm doing it because I really want to write a nice card for her. And I wrote a bunch of like corny jokes in it because that made me feel like I was giving something to her,
Nice.
regardless of how she responds,
Yeah, I agree.
I can't tell you, but here's the thing, before I give myself too much credit, Danny, you know how many times that I've done the opposite of that compared to that? Like how many times I've just gone in the coffee shop and just like pushed people over and ran in front of somebody and didn't open the door for them and like got annoyed at their kid that's screaming and blah, 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 blah. Like that, before I give myself too much credit, I'll fall on my sword and say, yeah, but more often than not, I fail.
Well, you just want, when you're in heaven, you want them to playing the good film of all those good scenes. Let's ignore the times we failed.
Let's not talk about the heaven film thing. That's going to bring up some conservative Christian trauma that I grew up with. So we have the exact opposite experience as far as finding Jesus, as far as that goes. Maybe we'll have that on another conversation. So as we end here, and we're about to wrap up, what would you say to the people? Again, a good amount of this audience has gone through difficult things. They've gone through life challenges. They've gone through, whether it's things like divorce or business failure or health incidents, or God forbid, losing a child or a parent or a loved one. Like what does that reset look like? Like what would you have anything to say to them just as far as their purpose and their mission and how they just keep moving forward during resets like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was Robert Schuller who said, "Tough times don't last, tough people do," and I completely agree with. Kind of like, I don't really like the movie Castaway. I don't know why, because I love everything Tom Hanks is in. But at the end of the movie, basically, he's been saved from the deserted island, and it turns out the love of his life is married a dentist, and his buddy's just talking to him. And for the first time, he really sees his buddy. Like he was always so self-centered, like what we were talking about earlier. And he's like, "Oh, I remember when your wife passed, and I wasn't really there or whatever." And like he's really connecting with his buddy, and his buddy's like, "What's it like for you? I mean, your girlfriend, she's married somebody else now." And he's like, it's just, this is a continuing process. Every day it's a new day. Like it's kind of a cool ending to the movie. I'm like, yeah, like you get up, tomorrow's a new day. I always teach this to my students. I'm like, the rear view window is a lot smaller than the windshield. Like I'm looking forward, I'm not looking backward. I mean, yeah, the stuff backward, it shapes us, but it doesn't have to define us. You have that choice every single day.
I love that. The stuff backwards shapes us. It doesn't define us. That's so true. And it's been a long time since I've seen that movie. I remember liking it, but I love how you just described the ending, because, movies often in that demographic would be like happily ever after
Yeah.
nonsense at the end, right? Like she waited for him for 20 years or whatever it was, right? But I love the fact that it was just like, nope, time to move on. It's the next move on. And it's not ignoring the past or the pain or the hurt or anything else. It's acknowledging it, acknowledging, like you said, that that's how it shapes us, and then figuring out, now how do I move forward with it instead of just staying in it. It's like that person that goes to therapy for 30 years to talk about the childhood trauma thing that they never get over. Like at a certain point, you got to graduate and be like, okay, I'm done talking about this thing that happened 30 years ago, because otherwise it's just defining my life.
That's right. To your point.
It's good. It's good stuff. Appreciate you. If people want to get a hold of you, which I'm sure they will, because you're fantastic, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Well, we didn't talk about what I usually talk about, which is how to take your personal experiences and create a powerful business story. But I will give that as a freebie for everybody. If you go to freestoryguide.com, guide like a tour guide, freestoryguide.com, I'll give you all your own well-crafted story blueprint. What this is the actual process that my co-founder, Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson, and I take our clients through on how to create a compelling presentation. What this does for you is it takes the guesswork out of why do I put this story here and where will it be more effective? And what this means for you is the peace of mind that you have a blueprint on how to create a presentation that's not just going to move hearts, but it's also going to move the needle and get more people interested in your business. You can get that at freestoryguide.com. And Josh, I loved our time together. You're a good man. This has been almost therapeutic for me, this podcast, because we talked about things I don't normally talk about, which is why I like your podcast, is I think guys need to talk about these things. Probably my favorite part was when you challenged me about respecting. I'm like, oh, that's good. We have a disagreement here. Let's talk about that. And that's good. These are good. And I'll tell you what, I will think about that discussion this is something that I will ponder for a while to listen to. I'm like, because I thought you made some really good points there. And I think the one thing about getting older is I have a Post-it on my desk that says, what if I'm wrong? Because the older I get, the more I realize I really don't know that much stuff. And I love learning. So thank you for teaching me today. I appreciate that.
I appreciate you, Danny, and I appreciate you saying that. It's a secret that I don't often reveal in this podcast, but one of my favorite things about this podcast is to bring people on and have them not talk about what they normally talk about, because it has nothing to do with not being interested in it. It has to do with the fact that people have such expansive, detailed, open lives and tragedies and everything else that they go through, and we often hide that with whatever our pitch is, right? Whatever that is. And we miss a lot of that. So I love bringing, especially like business guys like you on here to be like, okay, open up about your story though. Like forget about all the other stuff. Like let's talk about your story. However, as a personal testimonial, I think we talked about this. I did download that free story guide. I did go through it and it was actually very helpful for me. So I appreciate that. And I would encourage everybody listening and watching to do that. It will be in the show notes, so you won't have to remember what it's called. Just go down to the show notes and there'll be a resource there to download it. So I appreciate that very much, Danny. Thank you.
You, Josh.
All right. I was going to say something else, but I can't remember what it was. So we'll have to wait until next time. So that being said, if you enjoyed the episode as usual, forward it on to a friend that you think might need something that was talked about today. And go ahead, subscribe on YouTube, whether you're on YouTube or not. It really helps us out. Thanks, you guys. Until next time.